every second that when you hit that button on the app to say, start my vehicle, unlock my door, call for help, right? Whatever it may be, yes. That is all mission critical things where you cannot have identity be the slowest link in the chain. How do you tackle speed when it comes to make it secure, but make it fast?
Yeah, that's part of the process of bringing things to production to make sure that you have the performance, the response, the least latency involved when making. So there's in all of the best practices that need to be brought to bear when it comes to edge computing, right? To be able to make calls to an API services layer that can respond and recognize that a user is authenticated and has authenticated with MFA, and that we can process this request versus, this doesn't look right. Let's reject the request. Let's cancel their session because they've been compromised, right? We get a threat signal that says that the user may be compromised, right? So those are things that have to be taken into account. But at our scale and to be able to have a response time when you start your vehicle of a couple of seconds is something that is I think is the highest level of distributed system engineering at our level, to be able to get that done. And it's there's a lot involved. Like you just said, there's so many systems, so many interactions that happen that the customer never sees, right? But that we have to get involved with to make sure there's policies that get touched, that get triggered, so many points along the way.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Good. Guess what I'm thinking about?
But yeah, I mean,
wrong.
This is a safe for work podcast, so I don't know. What are you thinking about?
Well, I was thinking about IDPro. I was I was in the Slack channel, and it's just so full of treasures. So I was just scrolling through the general posts, and Hannah Suter had a post out there that was about demonstration of proof of possession. I'd never really read up on that. And someone posted an article that broke it down into like the 101 level. I was like, this is why I'm a member of IDPro. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to this podcast, either you found the wrong podcast or you should be a member of IDPro.
Yeah, it's worth I think it's $150, and it is well worth it just for the Slack channels alone. But you get so much more with it too, right? You get access to a bunch of resources and just cool people, nice people, friendly people. This is why I like the identity space. But yeah, big fan of IDPro. There's also, I think it got posted maybe in the last couple days or so. There are some board positions open up. So for people who aren't aware, that's something if they're interested in giving back. There is, I'm not sure how many, 1, maybe 2 board spots open, but go check out the IDPro website if that's something you're interested in. And then, of course, IDPro has a big presence of things like Identiverse and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, they're dedicated to the education within the industry. I would also say it's like, Hannah made that post. She's a very advanced identity practitioner. Anybody who's sitting out there listening is like, yeah, I don't even know what that is, and feeling intimidated. You could be a total beginner first year or two in the industry and post a question. Nobody's going to judge you negatively.
You can be a total expert. And I just not have had the experience on that. That's fine too.
Yeah. Yeah. I found myself posting questions sometimes thinking, I wonder if people are going to think this is a dumb question, but I shouldn't have that thought, because I don't think people look at it that way. They're excited.
I don't think so.
People are excited if they have an opportunity to kind of give back and respond to some of those questions.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is why I got into consulting, was when I was in, the real world of IAM, you really only know what you work on, and the opportunity to get into other areas that your organization doesn't do is generally not going to happen. So there are lots of people who are focused, like, for example, IGA, privileged access management. Maybe they're just authentication. They work just in Microsoft, right? There's so much to learn, so much to know. You will never know it all. Jim, you and I have been doing this for 20, 25 years each. Our guests have been doing it for a long time. There's just too much to learn at any, at a very expert level. It's very difficult to do. Plus, there's always something new coming up. I mean, remember when self-sovereign identity was like the thing that was going to change the world? Still waiting for it, a couple years later, but there's always something new coming up. Now you've got AI, that's going to change things. So ask the questions, go research it, and you'll find that IDPro Slack channel is an awesome place to get answers.
IDPro Slack channel and then this podcast, because a lot of times when you brought up the that topic, we a lot of times get guests on, say David Motti or something, and he'll talk about something like machine identities. It's like, yeah, nobody's talking about that. 2 years later, it's like everybody's talking about machine identities and non-human identities. And so, we keep pushing ourselves like, all right, let's bring a guest on who's going to talk about something that we don't know a whole lot about, but we're good at asking questions.
Yeah. I mean, you can explain that to us two dummies. Hopefully other people who are way smarter than us can pick it up over audio or video from a podcast standpoint.
Exactly. Another great source, here's my tricky lead in. Another great source for learning is conferences. We happen to have discount codes galore.
Yeah, that was a pro segue, I got to say. So yeah, conferences. We've got a bunch of them. The one that is coming up next is going to be London, the Gartner IAM Summit there. So that's March 24th and 25th. If you use the code IDAC425, that will save you 425. I think we settled on euros, 425 of some currency off of that. But that's a great one to go attend, especially, for folks that are maybe in the London area or maybe Europe at large. We won't be there, but we will probably be at the one later this year in the US. I have to imagine we've kind of gone for the last several years, but they were nice enough to extend that. So we're passing it along. And you don't have to remember any of these. They'll always be on our website. If you go to idacpodcast.com and just scroll down, you'll see all the different conference discounts that we've got or any other things we have going on. You can kind of find there real easily. So there's that one. And then the one you and I are very excited about. Yeah, yes. This is Berlin. I just booked my flight yesterday, or maybe it was the day before. So May 6th through the 9th, it's in Berlin. It's the Cooper-Cole European Identity and Cloud Conference. If you use the code IDAC25MKO, you get 25% off. So Jim, you and I are going to be there. Very excited. All I have booked right now is a flight into Germany and a hotel. I have not yet figured out what I'm going to do after that. My wife and I are still kind of planning post Berlin. But I'm excited to be out there for the first time. Never actually been in Germany other than the Frankfurt airport on my way to Chennai, India. So
yeah, I'm excited. And getting outside of the airport will be great.
Yes, it will.
And I'm going the week before. I'm going to be in Oslo the week before, and we're doing an identity beer, and already have at least 4 people signed up for that. And hopefully that list extends further. So if you're a practitioner or involved in identity in some way, or at least interested enough to listen to this podcast, and you can be in Oslo the week before or live there, reach out to me on LinkedIn and love to get you involved in that identity beer.
Yeah.
We haven't picked the exact date yet.
Those are all I don't think I've ever been to one, but you'll be out there touring the countryside, identa beer in hand, I guess. Yeah. I had a couple people reach out to me on LinkedIn, graciously being, offering to like show me around and things like that. I don't know where I will end up yet. So I apologize if I don't get back to everybody or if I don't hit your city. There's just too much to do in 1 week that I have between Berlin and trying to get back to the US. So
hopefully this isn't the last time we go to.
No, I think hopefully we can turn this into an annual pilgrimage or something, maybe for IDAC to head out to the Cooper-Cole conference. After that's done, vacation a little bit, and then Las Vegas for Identiverse. That one is June 3rd to the 6th. Again, you and I are going to be doing some stuff there. I don't think we're quite ready to announce some of the fun things we've got lined up, but we're still coordinating on how that exactly will work. But it will be a very fun another type of thing that we have done in the past that we're excited to bring to Identiverse. So I'll just leave it there. Probably not very good. I probably didn't obfuscate that enough. So I'm sure people will be able to figure that out. But June 3rd to 6th, IDV25-IDAC25, 25% off. And you'll be able to take advantage of that. And that stacks with the discounts as well. So you definitely want to take a look at that.
Yeah. So, Jeff, between those two conferences, are you going to get any work done this summer?
I have to because I have clients. So they're going to be expecting work to get done. So, yeah, I will be working things in between editing, broadcasting, publishing, working, all that good stuff. And hopefully I'll be able to unplug a little bit again while I'm in Europe to check out the sites.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Enjoy yourself a little bit for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing that we wanted to mention was we don't have the discount code for it yet, but we've been going to the FIDO Authenticate conference for, I don't know, what is it, in 3 or 4 years now in a row. And we've been doing something there. We'll probably do something again this year. We just haven't gotten that far with our planning yet. The conference is in October, but if you want to be a speaker, if you have an idea for a paper to submit, to present on, that deadline's coming up March 3rd, 2025 is the deadline. Go to authenticatecon.com. You can figure out the navigation then to submit a paper. And I would definitely recommend that. I think our discount code is usually pretty good, but I don't think speakers have to pay to get into the conference. I say that, and that's not true.
Andrew's probably like shaking his fist at the radio right now.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's turn up the heart if you're listening, Andrew. Turn up heart and stop listening to this. So no, but if you're interested in presenting, that's the deadline.
Okay, that's enough babbling from us. Again, check out the website. It'll have all the discount codes. I'm excited to welcome our guest on. He has been in the identity space for a very long time. He is Andrew Cameron. He's a technical fellow in identity and access management at General Motors. And before we go any further, Andrew, I don't want to say hi yet. I got to make a disclaimer, right? These are your views. The views expressed on this podcast by Andrew are his and not General Motors. So we're going to make that very clear. So I'm going to swear you in. Andrew, do you agree that that's fine?
Yes. I agree 100%.
Well, welcome officially, Andrew, to the show. We're very excited to have you here.
Gentlemen, I am honored and privileged. You can't be in the identity industry and not know about this podcast, and so I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here. People still discover it, so it's always great when you have new listeners and new guests on the show. We have tradition. First time anyone comes on the show, we ask them for their identity background. You've been doing this for a long time. Not to age you, right? But you've been doing this for a long time. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the identity space. Was it something that you chose, or did it choose you?
I feel like it chose me. I started off in app dev, doing all of the early Microsoft development technologies. And even in my early years at GM, I was a application architect. That was my primary responsibility. And one of my early roles was an architect lead on the deployment of our employee portal, right? So this is a pretty massive undertaking, hundreds of thousands of employees. This is going to be the face of IT for our employee population, right? And so there was a lot of effort that went into not only kind of what was built around in the portal, but we also positioned this portal to be a way to access applications throughout the enterprise, right? And so where most of the discussions ended up happening was, well, how do we secure access to application A once somebody logs into the portal, right? And so that typically always involved LDAP directories, access control lists, and all of those legacy ways of securing things that we did back in the early 2000s. And so being involved in that so much, I ended up being on a directory team, right? And so we were known as the LDAP team, and our big deal was to socialize SSO across the enterprise, right? That was actually a thing in the early days. And so that really kind of kicked off my learnings around identity, and I ended up meeting, all the luminaries guys that have been on this podcast previously. I mean, I remember we were deploying a product called OpenSSO in the early years. That was a Sun product. And we had a trainer come in and train us on how to deploy OpenSSO. And that trainer was Alan Foster, right? And that's a guy that you guys had on not too long ago. And, those are relationships that have endured over the past 20 years, right? Folks like Ian Glazer, somebody who's been on 100 times on this podcast, that have helped kind of guide me in terms of being embraced in the community. And when things like IDPro came along, and you guys promoted IDPro, and Jim's example is 100% accurate in terms of the value, because it's typically you don't have that kind of an engaged community to be able to bring issues and topics to and be able to get that kind of rich response, right? Typically, out on the internet, you're just a dog, right? So it's really great to see how IDPro and the community has grown in the years since it's been created. And, I've been privileged to be part of it, privileged to be around this community for so long, because it's something that's it's given me a career. It's given me a focus.
So you've been in this game for a while. How many years or how many rings on the tree do you want to claim as being an identity?
Yeah, 20 years this year, actually. So I don't know if there's any kind of celebration that I have planned, but it's really interesting to see how things have evolved. Because when we were early on, it was, we were trying literally to go to other organizations within GM just to get them to onboard to our enterprise LDAP environment, right? Like we didn't even own Active Directory, right? It was come to our enterprise LDAP environment and we can give you single sign-on, right? And the amount of time that went into debating things like password strength, it seems silly now, right? We're heading into actually passwordless, right? We're literally rolling out passwordless capabilities today. And so to think of how far we've come from a lot of the things that started off that kind of was the foundation of the identity and access management discipline. Some things haven't changed as much as they need to. I think IGA is somewhere that is kind of begging for some innovation, I think. But there have been a lot of other exciting areas. Customer identity is one area that has seen a lot of innovation and a lot of definition in that aspect of the market in recent years. And so, yeah, it's just, 20 years in, still passionate about it, still excited about it. So we're really looking forward to it.
Is there something that you kind of look back and say, that was a game changer for identity? Is it something like, it could be something as simple, well, I don't know if it's simple, but hey, we've got standards now, SAML, OpenID Connect, or whatever before that, or maybe it was the advent of single sign-on. Is there something that in your mind that like jumps out? It's like, oh, like that's it.
I think what really kicked things off was the adoption of standards. I think things early on, like the adoption of SAML and eventually OAuth and OpenID Connect, really, because that was, most companies want to, align on that. And, everyone interacts with other companies in some way or another. And that gave you a language. It gave you a protocol on how you could allow external parties to come and authenticate to your enterprise and give them access to things, right? And so we started really early on in a partnership with Sun and Microsoft, where we were evolving the SAML standard early on. And then we promoted the fact that we were part of the Liberty Alliance, and we were promoting making products from Sun and Microsoft work. And this was in 2007, 2008, right? Where that kind of thing was relatively unheard of. So, those are things early on. I think the adoption of standards and the fact that standards like SAML and OAuth and OpenID Connect have really endured, right? And that's what's so exciting about things like passkeys, where, that has gotten industry adoption at a rate that we haven't really seen before, right? It seemed like it was probably a year or two where we started hearing about passkeys to everyone is supporting it. All of the big names are supporting it. And now, we're as implementers, we're really trying to catch up to kind of bring that feature set and to bring all of the goodness of what passkeys are to our users and our customers.
So I know GM's, obviously a very big company, and I've always been curious about this adoption of passkeys because they feel like the groundwork was laid a couple of years ago, but just because it's like, hey, we had this new thing, it takes time to adopt those sorts of things and get them into plans, et cetera. What was it that was like, okay, now's the time where GM is looking at this and say, hey, let's do passkeys? Like, what was the key to that?
A desire to get away from passwords, just an overall recognition. We had adopted kind of zero trust principles and practices formally, probably 3 years ago. And the desire to move the authentication level to kind of raise the floor in terms of authentication levels that we would be willing to accept to do things like privilege operations is really what kicked things off. And be perfectly honest, passkeys prevents a user experience benefit that we really haven't seen to this point, right? So, being able to move away from passwords to kind of increase that base level of security when we're accessing things within the enterprise, and you make everybody happy by not having to enter passwords, not having to do, less secure MFA steps as a second action to get access to things, really ends up being pretty much a win overall. There's effort to get there, and there's a lot of kind of turning of the battleship when you're dealing with enterprises of our size in order to not only get users configured and set up correctly so that they can take advantage of the stronger authentication methods, but there's a lot of cross-boarding of applications in a lot of situations to make sure that they're leveraging modern authentication in order to take advantage of the single sign-on that comes with leveraging modern auth in the cloud and things like that. So it's not a turning of a switch and just make everybody work. There's a lot of internal collaboration that happens across a whole lot of teams to be able to bring an enterprise of our size to be able to take advantage of passwordless technologies.
And it never moves as fast as, we in the identity space want it to move, right? But this is the reality of, especially a larger enterprise where, like you said, turning the battleship takes time, right? Or if you want to use a train or whatever analogy, right, of a big thing that needs to shift direction or speed, it does take a lot of time and a lot of planning too, because you're dealing with, not just the technical aspect of it, but the change management aspect of it from a business process perspective, which can make or break how successful something like that might be, right?
No, and you have to prepare to over communicate. You have to prepare to make sure that you give all of the guidance necessary. So, are you going to be force feeding some of these changes, or are you going to make them self-service, right? Are you going to encourage people to go and set up their account to take advantage of passwordless? Those are decisions that have to be made pretty early on. And over communicate is my highest recommendation in everything that we've done, is that you don't want to make people have to pick up a phone or call somebody or fire up a Slack session. You want to make sure that they have all of the information available to them to be able to make the decisions needed to get switched when they have to. And so, those are lessons learned, right? You on our side of it as implementers, we want to rush these changes in and say, hey, we won, we did it. And it's not quite that simple at our size and scale. It's never that simple, and it's never that quick, right? And so it's a process. The change management, like you said, is a huge aspect of it. And when we started, we're probably over a year in to transitioning the enterprise completely. And it involves users, apps, devices, data. It's a full level transition.
I know there's so much we want to get to, but I got to ask, what is been the common question maybe that you've gotten from end users about this whole passkey, passwordless type approach? Is there something that is out there? Because I'm sure people out there listening is like, all right, what should I be thinking about from a deployment standpoint for this? But has there been anything common that you've noticed?
Not quite yet. I think that the biggest adoption that is still, surprisingly, that is so much of an adoption challenge is, and typically in enterprise platforms, there's the authenticator app, there's the ability to use some passwordless mechanism to confirm an authentication flow. And those are things that people, they typically think they're already either using their own, they want to bring in and use, or, they're suspect about using it on a personal device. And those are things that we have to kind of coax through policy and making sure that they're aware that there's no personal information involved on those devices. Tapping a push notification is there's no private information that gets involved in that. So those are kind of the main questions that we get when we transition a lot of our activity to using things like an authenticator app. But the user experience benefits are pretty significant. So they usually, once they get used to that in their flow, they literally forget their password, right? They literally haven't used it in so long that they end up, when they actually ever get something that requires them to enter a password, they forget it and have to end up resetting it. So that's a good thing. And hopefully we'll get to the point where they'll never need it.
Yeah. Well, just write it down and just stick it under your keyboard. That's a safe place.
Oh, no. So much work to get away from that. But yeah, those were the days.
I introduced you as a technical fellow. I don't think we've ever had a technical fellow on our show before. What the heck does that even mean? And what is the day-to-day like for a technical fellow?
Yeah, so when I complete when I sign up for a webinar and it'll ask for my title, I just put identity guy because in my role, and it's pretty much a technical specialist at an enterprise level, and it kind of recognizes that I've been doing it for a while. And so my role is pretty much to guide all things related to implementing identity and access management technology, right? And so whether it's on the enterprise side, whether it's on the customer identity side, all of the projects that we run throughout the enterprise, I'm responsible for making sure that there's a level of quality and then every integration point is doing what it should be, and that we're meeting the needs of our business stakeholders, right? Those are things that typically, my whole engagement in getting into customer and identity and access management started with a phone call that was like, hey, what do you guys know about customer identity, right? Because they knew that we were primarily responsible for enterprise identity, workforce identity, and we really didn't own that part of the environment. And it was a single phone call that got me involved to say, let's see where we can help here. And it ended up with suggesting a product, implementing the product, and getting it deployed. And, by the time we actually got it deployed, there were hundreds of people involved, 4, 5, 6 organizations across the enterprise were involved in it. Ended up being a really big deal. And we actually did it over COVID while we were actually realizing that we were about to be shut down through COVID is when this deployment actually happened. So.
And you're going to be at Identiverse, right? So I think we're going to be maybe even on the same panel. I think our friend Sean is putting something together, but give us a preview of what to expect at Identiverse.
So Sean and I are putting together a continuous identity workshop. So we're really excited to really get into some of the futures of kind of where we think identity is headed. And so there's a lot of activity, and you guys were at the most recent Gartner conference and at Authenticate as well, where there was an interrupt that they hosted that brought a lot of companies together who are supporting CAPE and the Shared Signals Framework specification. And there's just a lot of real benefit when it comes to being able to be completely dynamic in terms of how we apply policy around access control, and being able to integrate multiple security products is really a huge benefit over taking advantage of the Shared Signals Framework. And so we're going to host a workshop to kind of get folks immersed in what's involved to be able to take advantage of that. And so that's he didn't bring me along kicking and screaming. Sean was so excited about it. You can't deny his enthusiasm around this topic. So I'll just come along for the ride.
Andrew, I figure with the technical fellow, it would be like, who's this Andrew Cameron again? Oh, he's the technical fellow down the hall there.
Yeah, I hear that. That's a piece of comedy gets thrown my way once in a while. But it's easier to just talk about it as I'm the identity guy at GM. If there's something going on with identity and access management at GM, probably I'm aware of it.
I'm definitely interested in this customer IAM topic because I imagine you've got a ton of complexity, and I could probably, talk your ear off for an hour or ask you questions, or all day and ask you questions. So I picked a few that I think that you could probably really speak to. I would imagine that you guys have a pretty wide mix of legacy systems, modern systems, and everything in between. And that changes over time, like the mix of technologies that you're carrying along. You probably still have some mainframes, to be honest, right? Maybe not.
Do.
Okay. You do.
Not ashamed to say that we do, yes.
And that makes it tougher to get an identity solution that works for everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when we initially kind of rolled out our customer identity strategy, our biggest goal was to, own the features and functions that were most important for authenticating the customer, right? And so that meant standing up an identity platform that was able to perform at scale for, our tens of millions of customers. And that also included things like taking profile management out of the hands of their applications, right? And providing a service that allowed our application teams to say, can we look up the profile information for this customer and not have to replicate profile information across application environments? Those are some of the, simple goals, but it was important to establish that as part of our platform to be able to allow it to scale and to be able to allow other applications to come on board, and they don't have to worry about how does authentication work. As long as you're able to support core standards, OpenID Connect, OAuth, that your application can plug into our environment, and we can get your customer authenticated, and we get profile information available for the customer, and that's for everyone who plugs into our platform.
Yeah, and something like profile information, it sounds so simple, right? Come on, applications don't keep the profile information. And then it's like, okay, well, what is central profile information? Is shipping address centralizable, or does it matter what application they're using? So there's that technical complexity, and there's also the complexity of, well, do I want to give this up out of my application? Centralize it, right?
There was a lot of that.
There's a lot
of angst around that as well. Yeah, it was, wait, you're gonna remove these key customer attributes out of our application and put them somewhere essentially. Well, what do we want to allow them to change it? Well, the customer will go to one location where they manage profile, and they can make that change there, right? And so those are concepts that early on that didn't sell immediately, but the benefits from a overall enterprise and platform perspective were really kind of key to kind of getting that accelerated once we got it stood up.
Everyone sees the value of it 2 years after it's implemented, and they forget how hard it was to get there. But it takes somebody like yourself who actually care.
I don't miss an opportunity to remind them, Jim. Not at all.
I know. I mean, that to me, though, is like a big deal. Like, getting profile centralized is different than just doing single sign-on.
Absolutely.
And it's now you're starting to dig into what is built into each and every application, which is this picture of an identity. Whereas, let's take something like privacy information or communication preferences.
Yes.
I don't want to receive a newsletter. So say I go into one application, I turn off newsletter, and I keep getting newsletters because all the other applications, I didn't go and turn it off in my profile there, right? The customer experience right there would be garbage. But if you can get all the applications to see that and say for the better good, it's let's centralize that. Now but it takes somebody like yourself caring. And when I hear I've worked for large companies, and I've done a lot of the CIM stuff, and lasting somewhere 20 years, you go through, you have to have a little bit of a tough skin. And then I'm also sure, Andrew, that you're in the role that you're mentoring people and encouraging them that, look, sometimes you have to go through the grind, and you're going to hit some lows. You got to be able to bounce off those lows. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 1,001 stories. I mean, there's a lot of, you want to make sure that you prove the desire to want to collaborate with people, right? You don't want to come in with I know I'm right and you're wrong, and this is how it's going to go. So being able to listen has always been really key, right? To be able to provide some feedback to people that is not deprecating or demeaning in any way has been something that has worked for me, right? And GM culture in the early 2000s was very different than how it is now, and I was fortunate to be around leaders who didn't necessarily believe we needed to rule with an iron fist to be able to get things productive in an enterprise environment the size of GM. And so that's kind of what has allowed me to kind of lead in that way, right? I don't lead large teams. I don't manage large teams as an individual contributor. I've more focused on leading by example, by the example that I set. And so I don't get into trying to make sure that people know that I'm right. Consensus building is still something that is valuable, and it makes people feel like they're included. And so that's something I've always tried to follow.
Yeah, I really love that. So again, I have to kind of pick my topics because they could bend your ear all day. But the last thing I wanted to talk about was I can imagine that you have a very, let's just call it complex, for lack of a better term, complex B2B environment where you've got obviously suppliers, you've got dealerships, you've got a global dealership network. You've got to supply those dealers with the ability to order new cars. Maybe you have also beyond dealers, you have like national accounts, like maybe a Hertz or a national, car rental kind of company where they buy thousands of cars. Well, they're not maybe going to buy them from a dealer, but there's all those complexities within. But one of the things I think from an identity standpoint that becomes the hardest to manage in all that is delegated administration.
Yes.
So that you don't have to have like your help desk having phone calls come in like, from a dealer in Toledo saying, hey, we just hired Nancy and she needs to have access to X, Y, and Z systems and all that. Somebody in that Toledo dealership can go ahead and set up Nancy. And then when Nancy no longer works there, take away her access. But that's one of the hardest things to solve, I think. Talk about that a little bit.
No, it is probably one of the hardest in workforce identity. It's one of the hardest aspects to manage. And just think about even what you see in the industry. You don't even see that many products out there that are targeted towards external user management, right? The IGA tools can do it to some degree, but it's everyone's enterprise is so different that you really have to put in some effort into, and that what you described was kind of the base level use case where, yes, every organization, every dealership, every supplier company has a security coordinator, someone responsible for onboarding their users. But as you might guess, they're not exactly diligent in removing their access when they're supposed to, right? And how do we handle that, right? And how do we work with those organizations when they have breaches in their environment, when they have security issues, right? Those are things that we have a dedicated security organization in our IT organization that focuses on third-party security, right? And making sure that our partners that we work with maintain a minimum level of risk in their environment. And we have some very important requirements, or any partner that we interact with, to allow them to access GM systems. And so those are things that when you start dealing with, we have 10,000 dealerships globally. We have hundreds of, we have a supplier network that's multiple tiers where we have suppliers that manage suppliers that manage suppliers. And so it's very, very complex. We have entirely dedicated infrastructures to not only make the delegated admin piece happen, but I would even say that there's a B to B to C segment that comes in that doesn't fall into being managed with our workforce identity infrastructure, but they're not exactly customers, right? They fit into this. So the example that you brought up, the rent-a-car companies that we deal with probably fall into that space where they have a need to be able to do things like self-service registration, sign up and get an account to have access to certain systems. And they don't need to have access to all of our enterprise systems, but there's a certain segment of systems that they can get access to in a self-service manner that we manage that they have a need for as well. And so that's another segment of our external user population that we've had to manage and create additional solutions for in that manner.
I've got to imagine that the global aspect of what you do is probably been around like the entire time that you've been involved, but that brings on the whole language issue. How many languages do you need to support? And I'm going to ask the question this way. What is the harder thing to manage? Is it the languages or the different privacy laws that exist throughout the world?
Wow, that's a great question. I'd say that the complexity of privacy laws has been something that in recent years has really started to get attention, right? Because the fines in these regions are starting to get significant. So you don't want to get that wrong, right? And so especially when it comes to EU and how we handle location of personal data in those regions. It's really important. And so, it's being able and actually being required to build solutions to allow customers to do things like right to remove and things like that have been part of what we do in recent years. And so I'd say that's been the biggest challenge, right? Being able to respond to the varying demands of privacy globally for an enterprise of our size has been something that's been really, really important.
It's a struggle for everybody, I think, trying to piece this all together. But I think it underlines and sort of underscores the value that IAM comes in maintaining compliance with a lot of this stuff. If you're doing good IAM stuff, generally speaking, you're going to be that further ahead when it comes to compliance with regulations. At least that's my thought. Does that make sense, or do you disagree?
It makes perfect sense. So if you're doing things like not making multiple copies of customer profile information everywhere, that when
We're
it
just
comes
going to sync it. It's fine.
yeah. See, that's that's where that's where it sells itself, right? Where you don't have to be worried about how many copies of databases that have been thrown around the enterprise. That being able to satisfy privacy requirements gets a bit easier, at least, and then it's not as complex as it could be, right? And so, those are things, because that's real money, right? That's real cost that can get hit if you're not on top of all of the requirements. If your solutions don't meet those requirements, right? You can get in a lot of trouble really quick.
I'd like to take the conversation more to the consumer side. I feel like a lot of people listening probably have a vehicle. And one of the things that I've noticed over the last several years is the rise of what I'll call like a car account, right? Whatever the manufacturer is, GM is one of them, but Volvo, Tesla, Rivian, right? All, you name it, tend to have an app, and vehicles are moving now into almost like this cell phone on wheels type of thing, right? Software defined vehicles, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about how that works from an identity standpoint? Like, what are the benefits of having a GM account, or maybe in the case of GM, maybe it's a brand account, right? Whether it's Chevrolet or Cadillac or whatever it may be.
It's probably the most exciting part of what I would say of the customer identity space is the impact that we have on the user experience in that way, in that everything that the customer sees starts with what you do when you access your product, right? And that's usually, when as excited as you are when you buy a vehicle and you take it out of the dealership, the first thing you do is you log into whatever that mobile app is and check out all of the features that you can do through the mobile app, right? And so it's really exciting that we have been able to impact, the overall vehicle experience in that way, and to be able to have, not multiple accounts, not multiple logins when it comes to kind of taking advantage of those experiences, because, we're bringing more and more services into the vehicle experience, right? So, you're driving along the road and you come across a Starbucks, right? You can order your Starbucks ahead of time and not do it through your mobile app. Those are things that you can actually do through a head unit. And so it's important to be able to make the experience as seamless as possible and to bring a single identity into that experience. And so it should be something as simple as, here's an email address and I sign up for an app, and I can be secure in accessing my vehicle features. And that's a destination, right? And there's a lot of ways, and that's why kind of focusing on a single identity is so important, because you don't want to add friction to the user experience by, forcing them to poke in a password on the vehicle display, right? That's not the best way to go about that, right? So those are things that we've been working really hard to make sure that we bring that best experience to the vehicle customer.
I feel like this is an area that is still ripe for conquest by audio manufacturer, where you can personalize the vehicle. There's so much telemetry and so many things that you can now control in the vehicle through an app or APIs, right? Through the app, those sorts of things where, if you're carrying your phone, for example, and you're using maybe an ultra wideband for your mobile key, right? Or some other Bluetooth proximity, whatever, maybe in some scenarios, it knows that Jeff is getting in the car. So let me set the seat position to this. Let me log into, my Spotify account or Apple Music or whatever it may be, right? Set Google Maps and my direction based on a calendar entry, right? There's a lot of neat things that can happen, but you can't do that without the identity layer actually pulling that together. I feel like this is an opportunity to connect those experiences.
Yeah, or delegate privileges to do things in the vehicle to your kids, right? To be able to, work the display in the rear of the car to whatever they want to do, and be able to have their preferences saved to a family set of preferences. Those are things that are also part of the picture, right? And those are all huge, right? Those are selling points, right? When you're able to provide that kind of granularity of features within the vehicle experience. So yeah, I mean, that's what's exciting about it, right? And it's really exciting to be able to see, not only to be able to enable those cool things, but from our perspective, we're trying to keep it secure, right? And so we're trying to, and I know you guys you've had Andrew Shikiar on several times, and I know that Fido has created an automotive working group that's pretty exciting, and I can't announce anything, but I just keep in mind that we're looking at it. We're aware of it, and we're excited to see how that progresses.
I feel like this is an area that a lot of people struggle with, not people, meaning auto manufacturers, when it comes to really nailing that app experience. I promised before we hit record that I would not get on my soapbox about the experience that I've had with one of my recent vehicles and let's just call it, not barely passable grade that I would give it from an experience. Yeah. Why is it so hard to get that right? Are there this is probably more of an app development question, but are there technical underpinnings from an identity perspective that make developing an app like that have those capabilities more difficult or thought process? Or is this like, hey, we've got the identity side, but there's still more work to do on maybe API management or other telemetry, items that might be coming from the vehicle?
Yeah, huge aspect in terms of security to be able to have a consistent set of security controls that are end to end, right? So that, not only are you doing things like MFA and securing the account experience when the customer logs in, but to be able to maintain that context all the way back into back-end systems. And so it is important down to the developer level to be able to understand the differences of experience when you are showing a web view versus a native app experience, and the differences of how that is perceived by the customer. I can't tell you the level of discussion that I have been involved in when it comes to making decisions around showing in a mobile app, whether you're showing something as simple as a web view versus a native screen, and how people get very passionate about what's best versus what's most secure, right? And so the standards do have a play in that, and as standards evolve and as products evolve to be able to support those better experiences, that's great. And I think OAuth, and I think what's been exciting is kind of the version of OAuth that has near approval. The 2.1 version of OAuth is coming out that's addressing some of that, actually keeping things more secure, but it's allowing bring more native experiences to our customers. And so that's something that's it's a help overall, but it's huge to be able to make sure that there's consistency across the experiences, and not only from just the app itself, but to how interactions get into your back office. And so things like WAF and API gateways and all of that plays a role when it comes to the customer, authenticating, doing MFA, and doing something as simple as hitting the button to start their vehicle. There's an awful lot of interaction that happens to secure that from end to end.
I feel like this is an area that maybe people aren't as aware of, is the speed of all this needs to be like sub-millisecond, because you just listed a whole bunch of like speed bumps, right?
Yes.
The WAF and API bouncing back and forth, microservices, et cetera. Every second that when you hit that button on the app to say, start my vehicle, unlock my door, call for help, right? Whatever it may be, yes, that is all mission critical things where you cannot have identity be the slowest link in the chain. How do you tackle speed when it comes to make it secure, but make it fast?
Yeah, that's part of the process of bringing things to production, to make sure that you have the performance, the response, the least latency involved when making. So there's in all of the best practices that need to be brought to bear when it comes to edge computing, right? To be able to make calls to an API services layer that can respond and recognize that a user is authenticated and has authenticated with MFA, and that we can process this request versus, this doesn't look right. Let's reject the request. Let's cancel the session because they've been compromised, right? We get a threat signal that says that the user may be compromised, right? So those are things that have to be taken into account. But at our scale and to be able to have a response time when you start your vehicle of a couple of seconds is something that is I think is the highest level of distributed system engineering at our level, to be able to get that done. And it's there's a lot involved. Like you just said, there's so many systems, so many interactions that happen that the customer never sees, right? But that we have to get involved with to make sure there's policies that get touched, that get triggered, so many points along the way. And that's, but it's fun. That's what's made the whole journey fun, to be able to get into all of that.
I was going to say, you sound like you're having fun with it. It's getting more and more fun as time goes on. In addition to kind of the speed bumps that Jeff mentioned, and I think he was right on with that. The thought that I was having the whole time was, you got to remember it's a car. There's all these things going on. It's got to be able to stop when it gets to that red light. And if it's got to send an API and if it gets to a point where the technology can compromise safety, especially, that would not fly. Those are just some background thoughts. So I'm not asking you to react to that because that's kind of obvious, right?
Yeah.
But you did bring up something about standards. And I would think, one of the hurdles would be that this is an area when it comes to technology in the cars that's going to be a real differentiator between car one and car two. But the security piece and setting standards for security, to me, everybody's a long-term winner if there is some standards work that's done together. So is that your perspective that you bring when you're working with a group like FIDO in terms of, moving forward this working group? And I know you didn't have an announcement, but I just wanted to know if that was your perspective.
Yeah, so absolutely. The answer is yes, that when you consider that, as consumer technologies take off, so things like passkeys that people are adopting, that the technology platforms are adopting, right? You would think that customers would be ready and willing to leverage those technologies with their in-vehicle experiences, right? So using passkeys for payments might be something that people are interested in, right? And so to have those and to see the industry adoption at this point is an indicator that the customers would like to be able to continue to use these kind of features as they're made available. So, yeah, I mean, again, we're aware of that, and we want to make everyone's experience easier. So we'll be paying close attention to those as that evolves, right? And so, yeah, we're really excited to hear. And I've talked to Andrew a number of times about this, that the working group around FIDO has kicked off for Automotive, so that we're expecting a lot of great things to come out of that.
I'd say, at some level, going back to that exciting feeling, it's like, if you can only just start your career over right now and just see where things are going the next 20 or 30 years or whatever it's going to be that a career becomes after in that time. But let's talk about AI. I mean, that's on the tip of everyone's tongue, right? It's almost scary to think right now, if you're just starting out right now, am I going to be obsolete 20, 30 years from now? I think it's more of an enabler. I think AI is going to be built to serve humans and make life better. That's my optimistic perspective. Yeah. What's your perspective on, a couple of big things that are going to happen in your industry, in the automotive industry, because of AI?
I think we're going to see a larger proliferation of agent-based AI that will interact with customers and to be able to give that first level of service and experience that is more responsive, more accurate, in terms of what you may have been able to get from the chat bots that kind of preceded agents today. And so I think that's going to be kind of low-hanging fruit to be able to take advantage of those kinds of experiences. Within the solutions that we build and deliver, I think, machine learning and AI has been used from a security perspective, right? Where we've been getting threat signals that have been based on AI for a number of years now, right? And so, things like password spray attacks, things like impossible travel, all of that is based on machine learning that the vendors are providing. So I think you'll see that evolve, right? Enterprises of our size are building a pretty rich set of data around users and entitlements and the resources that they access. And so to be able to do all the things like automatic deprovisioning if you're not using a resource make a lot of sense, right? You don't have to go through that manual effort of removing somebody through an access review. You have some kind of agent, watching all of that activity. And if they don't touch something for 6 months, then you must not need access to it. Let's take you out of it. So I think those are kind of things that will start to make a lot of sense within the enterprise and things that touch customers. I think you'll start to see some form of agentic AI in the vehicle eventually, where you'll be able to do things. If you can do it within your home, you should be able to do a lot of those things within the vehicle. So I think you'll start to see a lot of that eventually.
So I think that's probably a good spot where maybe we can leave it for this week. I want to thank you because I told you before we hit record that we're going to take your brain and splay it out. And we can keep going on and on for this. I feel like this is an area that is super exciting. I'm an EV fan. I think that's kind of on record at this point. Yeah. And the identity experience is such a core part of that. I want to see you guys nail it, right? Yes. Just like I want to see everyone nail it, because this is the experience you're having in the vehicle. So I think of the future, right? Where is this going? Okay, we're all connected vehicles and things got to be secure. What happens when vehicles start talking to each other and things get safer, whether it's self-driving or even just shared signals maybe between vehicles, which are devices, to say, hey, I'm slowing down or I'm accelerating. I mean, I just think of the safety applications. When
there are standards for that too.
Yes. Yes. So I think it would be super cool to get there. And, identity is going to be such a core component of that. And as Jim mentioned, we can talk about this forever. So, but I want to talk about a couple things. You're a Detroit guy. I want to, first of all, and I'm an Lions fan. You can see on your shirt there. I'm a Bears fan. So I want to thank you, first of all, for Ben Johnson and having him come over. We're very excited to have him. I've kind of been on record with my friends as it's Ben Johnson or bust. We got the guy. So thank you for letting him come to us. That being said, I was rooting for Detroit Lions in the playoffs. I wanted to see them at least make it to the Super Bowl. But that didn't happen. So I'm going to put you on the spot for Detroit Lions. Give me a win total for next year, because they had a great year this year.
Yeah. No, I think 12 wins is the floor, right? So, we're bringing the cast back. We don't have our coordinators, so that's going to be interesting evolution of how things happen. But 12 wins is the kind of the minimum that I would say. And let's get a home playoff game, and that's the lowest expectation at this point, right? And as a Lions fan, after 60 plus years of what we have realized, what we've seen in the past couple of years has been great, so, and that's regular season. One of my most tremendous playoff disappointments was last year when we were at halftime of the NFC Championship and thought we were in the bag, and it didn't happen. So, we'll stick with it. We'll keep the faith, and I think a minimum of 12 wins next year. Get a home playoff game, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, so we're gonna put that on record. That's that'll be on ESPN. 12 wins or bust for the Detroit Lions, courtesy of NFL analyst Andrew Cameron, and also technical fellow of IAM at GM. Yep. All right, another for Detroit thing: pizza. Are you a Detroit style, New York style, or Chicago style pizza?
I am Chicago style primarily, and we have a Chicago style pizza place here in Detroit called Pizzapopolis. It's in downtown Detroit that has been a staple for decades, and I would recommend anyone to hit that It's as good as any Chicago deep dish that I've ever had, and I've had Giordano's and everything else from Chicago, but I'd say Pizza Populous is probably our best kind of deep dish Chicago style pizza, and that's the one I've enjoyed the most.
It's the one of the things I miss living in North Carolina now is the pizza down here is nowhere near as good as the Chicago area. Yeah, so I'm always looking for pizza spots to hit up. Okay, Jim, real quick. Are you New York, Chicago, or Detroit pizza?
I've always been Detroit, or, I used to work at the Renaissance Center, Andrew, and,
as did I.
Greektown, there's, I don't know. I always felt like Detroit was coming back. I was there around 2009 through 2012, and I felt like Detroit was really coming back. But what I really loved the most about the place was the pizza. And, but given that I love New York and Chicago style pizza, there's not many pizzas I don't like. So, but Detroit's my favorite.
Yeah.
I want to
the early stages of our kind of the downtown rebirth was right around 2011, 2012. It's a lot different even now than it was 10, 12 years ago. So it's pretty exciting down there now.
Yeah. I've always been rooting for Detroit to come back because I think it became like the thing that people would almost joke about. It's like, oh, it was safe to joke about, like, oh, Detroit is falling apart. And it's like, first off, it's not really funny, and second off, it's really a good city. And now I felt like it was coming back while I was there.
Yeah, I've been here all my life. I'm a lifelong Detroiter, and I will. I can represent. If you want to know the truth, talk to me. I'll give you the truth. Don't follow the internet and what it's been saying. From a downtown perspective, it's so totally different, and it's anyone that's the NFL draft that was here a couple of years ago, I think, was an overwhelming example of us being able to host large events and people all having a great time when they're here. So it was pretty cool.
I've never been to Detroit other than the airport. That's pretty much it. One of the cities in the Midwest I haven't been to.
Come on, Jeff. I'll give you the grand tour. Anytime you're welcome.
All right. That's probably a good spot. Well, I'm going to head up to Detroit. We're going to get some pizza, and then I'm going to continue to take little slices of Andrew's brain and tear it out and put it on display for people in the podcast. So that's what we'll do. Andrew, thank you so much for being part of this. It's funny right now because you're using the virtual background and you've totally faded back into it. It's almost like Homer going into the bush.
The slime.
I think, the lighting just changed in my room, which is really interesting. But yeah.
If that's not a signal to wrap up, there you go. All right, Andrew, thank you for being part of this. I'm going to have your LinkedIn profile in our show notes so people can reach out, whether it's about identity or maybe just better places to eat pizza in the Detroit area where you can have those conversations. You can find us on the web, idcpodcast.com. Again, we'll have all of our discounts for the conferences on our homepage. Reach out to Jim and I, and we get lots of great guests come on through word of mouth and networking and things like that. So let us know if you've got folks that would be good for an episode like this. And like and subscribe. That always helps us out. Doesn't cost you anything. Hit that button, but it does help us out immensely. So with that, we'll go ahead and leave it for this week. Andrew has almost completely faded into the bush like Homer. And thank everyone for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with you all in the next one.
Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.